She gets ready for a joint appearance with Bernie Sanders. Remember him? She and the senator will be at the University of New Hampshire today. Donald Trump has a jam-packed schedule today as well. First in the Windy City, where he's delivering remarks to the Polish-American Congress. Then it's off to the suburbs for a private fundraiser there, all before holding rallies in Iowa and Wisconsin later today. Senior national correspondent John Roberts is live in Chicago with the latest. John.
John, good morning to you. Donald Trump just in the northern part of Chicago this morning at the Polish National Alliance, just about to wrap up a roundtable. He'll be speaking to the group in just a few minutes. This is an important group for him. It was also an important group for some of the people that he would like to follow into the White House, Ronald Reagan and Bush 41. And speaking of the Bush family, of course, they've made no secret of their disdain for Donald Trump. But late yesterday, a group of 50 Bush alumni came forward and said that they were going to support Donald Trump. We'll put up just 5 of the people, some of the best known who are now throwing their weight behind Donald Trump. Former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, the former White House spokesman Ari Fleischer, John Ashcroft, who was the Attorney General, Elaine Chao, who did transportation and labor in the Bush administration, as well as Tommy Thompson, former governor of Wisconsin, who was the Secretary of Agriculture. Donald Trump on the campaign trail yesterday, will be again today, trying to regain some momentum after a debate that had some rocky moments for him, focusing all of his fire last night on Hillary Clinton, suggesting that he is going to be much tougher on her in the next meeting, which is coming up, that town hall in St. Louis. Here's what Trump said last night.
For 90 minutes, I watched her very carefully, and I was also holding back. I didn't want to do anything to embarrass her, but I watched her, and she was stuck in the past. For 90 minutes, on issue after issue, Hillary Clinton defended the terrible status quo.
In his speech today to the Polish National Alliance, Donald Trump will be talking a lot about law and order, including his plans to bring back stop and frisk, saying what worked in New York City for a number of years could work very well in a city like Chicago that has been gripped by such terrible violence. Here's what Trump said about stop and frisk.
Stop and frisk in Chicago, especially where it's going crazy, could save thousands of lives, just like it saved thousands of lives in New York City under Mayor Giuliani. Overwhelmingly, this will save African American and Hispanic lives.
And Mayor Giuliani speaking out today against a couple of statements that were made in the debate on Monday night about stop and frisk, where Hillary Clinton said it didn't work, and the debate moderator, Lester Holt, said it was unconstitutional. Giuliani saying this morning, quote, in Mrs. Clinton's case, it's the usual misrepresenting she does when she does not know what she's talking about. As for Mr. Holt, if a moderator is going to interfere, he should do some homework and not pretend to know the law when he does not. Mr. Holt and NBC cannot overrule the U.S. Supreme Court. After he wraps up in Chicago today, he's also got a fundraiser that Mike Ditka will be hosting. He goes to Council Bluffs, Iowa, a state where he leads Hillary Clinton by 5 points, and then to Waukesha, Wisconsin, a state where he trails Hillary Clinton by 5 points. The battle for the Midwest is on. John?
We have a legal panel coming up all about that, the legality of stop and frisk. That'll be interesting. John Roberts in Chicago.
Yeah,
Thank you, John.
Issue.
Yeah, it
Thanks,
is.
John.
Thanks.
Well, speaking of the debate, Donald Trump said at Monday's big event that he's the change agent in this election and that a vote for Hillary Clinton is a vote for business as usual.
And Hillary, I just ask you this. You've been doing this for 30 years. Why are you just thinking about these solutions right now? For 30 years you've been doing it, and now you're just starting to think of solutions.
Well, actually,
I will bring back jobs. You can't bring back jobs.
Well, actually, I have thought about this quite a bit.
Yeah, for 30 years.
In the meantime, President Obama countering Mr. Trump's arguments, saying Clinton's experience is an asset.
Look, I think Hillary did a great job. And again, I've been frustrated by the degree to which, partly just because she's been around a long time, people just do not give her credit. And part of it maybe is because she's a woman. And, we have not elected a woman president before. But here's somebody who, as I said at the convention, is as qualified as anybody who's ever run for this office. And she's been on the right side of the issues that we care about. And we need to support her. And that begins, by the way, by making sure that everybody's registered and everybody's voting. The stakes in this election are so high.
Let's bring in Charlie Hurt, columnist for The Washington Times, and Melinda Henneberger, opinion writer for USA Today. It's great to have you both. One of the reasons why we're looking at this topic is because for each candidate, their past plays a role in their campaign, and we can see that in just a few days after the debate. I'm just curious, Melinda, what you think of the president's explanation or defense of Hillary Clinton, saying that she's taken for granted because she's been around for too long and perhaps because she's a woman.
Well, definitely gender plays a role. I mean, the reaction to her and to his remarks about her, I mean, that's certainly part of the conversation. But I do think that it's, you know, after you have 8 years of one party in the White House, you see voters think, well, what else you got? You know, there is a desire for change that we've seen that again and again as part of the cycle. So I think that she does have to show that she will do things that will move the ball, that will be different from the last 8 years, but at the same time, as she argues to her supporters, will continue the Obama legacy that he's telling people it will be an insult to him, for example, if the African American community doesn't come out and vote for her.
Charlie, do you think this is the fight that Donald Trump should have with Hillary Clinton, or at least the argument at this time, considering that his past comments and his past actions often become the forefront of conversation for his opponent as well?
Yeah, no, I think that the argument that, look, you've been at this for 30 years, you've been around for 30 years, you know, why are you only now starting to come up with these solutions? I think that was the best line of the debate. The line from the rally talking about that she's a part of the past, all of that is exactly where Donald Trump needs to stay. It's what has you know, generated this enormous support for him so far, both in the Republican primary and increasingly, I think, in the general election. And you know what? You know, Jenna, the future is scary. It's always a little bit scary, and Donald Trump is a little bit scary. But if he can sort of convince people that, yeah, you know, I'm not your usual politician, but I'm part of the future, and you know, and then, you know, list the ideas that are appealing to people. And then continue to go back to the part that Hillary Clinton represents a third term for Barack Obama, and she has been around for 30 years or 25 years. She's been on the national public stage, and so it's kind of hard that alone sort of disqualifies her.
Well, Charlie, let me ask you the same question though for Donald Trump. But you know, the Trump campaign obviously doesn't like this issue brought up, for example, about the beauty queen and the comments that he made about a beauty queen, and he's constantly having to defend that. And so what about Trump's past? Is it just as much of an issue for him as it is for Clinton?
I think the reason that he has been able to sort of step away from those, a lot of those really atrocious things that he said in the past, is the fact that he has been, the reason he's been on the public stage for so long is because he's been an entertainer. He's been in, you know, sales. He's been in real estate. He's been in all these other markets that thrive on not being politically correct, in being sort of rude and outrageous and dangerous. And it's why I've always believed that he had a lot more of an ability. He had a softer ceiling, meaning that he was going to be able to sort of appeal. He was going to be able to break away from his past better than Hillary Clinton, simply because he's entering a whole new line of work. Hillary Clinton is still, you know, her past is still part of this line of work. He can always say, and he has to some effect, that, look, yeah, I said all these things, it was terrible, but you know, it was a part of a TV show or whatever.
Okay, Melinda, what do you think about that argument?
He isn't. I haven't heard him say that anything he's ever said or done was terrible. I've never heard him apologize for anything. And what's more, he's still saying these outrageous things.
But Melinda, to Charlie's point, that one could look at it and say, okay, well, he was a businessman, he was an entertainer, he wasn't a politician, and yeah, he made some mistakes, but it's the here and now and it's the future that we're concerned about.
Yes, I think that people look at him and look, I mean, you only have to go on, you know, the history is prologue. You only have to go on who is this person, what has their life been about, and I think that both of these people will be judged on that basis.
We're watching the event. Rudy Giuliani had just stepped to the stage. He's introducing Donald Trump, and I'd love a quick thought from you, Charlie, about Rudy Giuliani's role in this campaign. Rudy Giuliani, where Donald Trump said during the debate, when we're talking about gender issues and we're talking about the past and the way all of this is used, during the debate, Donald Trump said, you know, I could say some things, but I'm not going to say things, and of course that was the reference to Bill Clinton's affair. Rudy Giuliani's been more direct about that, and I'm wondering how effective you think he is as a surrogate for Donald Trump and saying the things that Donald Trump hasn't.
Well, and Melinda's exactly right about that. But what, Donald Trump doesn't necessarily, he's not necessarily said these things and said that, what he said in the past is outrageous, but he has all of his surrogates, and Giuliani is kind of the best one of them out there, or one of the best ones out there, who will go directly there and say what either the candidate doesn't want to say or doesn't feel comfortable saying.
Do you think that should be part of the campaign now, Charlie? What do you think about that conversation coming up, if at all?
What do you mean? Which conversation?
Regarding the affair, Bill Clinton. I mean, we haven't even. Everyone talks about, and at the water cooler, about Monica Lewinsky. When are we going to see Monica? Hear about Monica? Any of that? Is that? Will we? Do you think that's even part of it?
I think Donald Trump needs to be very careful about it, and he acknowledged himself that when he saw Chelsea Clinton sitting in the audience, he didn't want to go there. And obviously he's playing a game when he says that. But you do have to be careful with it. But as you point out, Jenna, I mean, everybody's talking about it anyway. And I think for a lot of, especially young Democratic liberal voters who are coming to this, and they learn about all of this stuff that Bill Clinton perpetrated and Hillary Clinton helped cover up and all that kind of stuff. My goodness, these young people are just like, this is archaic. This is
Melinda, a quick final thought from you?
Well, he is going there. He brings it up all the time. He was tweeting about Jennifer Flowers and said he might be inviting her to the debate. I mean, he goes there constantly. We'll see if that works. But I think, 60% of undecideds are women who are likely voters, and I don't see him reaching out to those people very effectively at all. Not to mention, he's losing non-white voters by 44%, and his statements in that regard are not helping him either. So where he needs to do some work, I don't see him doing that.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what the poll numbers actually look like for some of these key voting groups a week from now. It'll be really interesting to see some of those numbers and what they can or cannot tell us. Charlie, Melinda, great to have you both. We're going to continue to watch the event in Chicago. If we could pull up that live picture, I think we do have it, of Rudy Giuliani speaking there. He's often giving the opening remarks for Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, we should mention, running about an hour behind. When he steps to the microphone, we'll bring you there. John?
This Fox News alert now. The Senate is preparing to vote to override President Obama's veto of a bill that allows 9/11 families to sue Saudi Arabia for its involvement in the terror attacks. The White House says it would set a dangerous precedent. Lawmakers, though, are hoping they can override his decision. Doug McElway joins us live from Capitol Hill. How is the vote counting going, Doug?
Well, the debate is still going on. We expect that vote at 12 noon today, but the Senate is certainly most poised at this point to override a presidential veto for the first time in the history of the Obama administration, and the House set to act later this week. A similar result is expected there. The JASTA bill would allow families or survivors of the 9/11 attacks to sue foreign governments that are found in court to be complicit in terrorist acts here in the United States. It was born from the belief by some that there is a growing body of evidence that the Saudi Arabian government or members of the Saudi royal family may have been at least tangentially involved in plotting the 9/11 attacks. But the bill is made for some really strange bedfellows and also for some very awkward political estrangements. When, for example, was the last time that you saw a very liberal Democratic Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut vote against anything that President Obama has done? But he is doing just that when it comes to the JASTA bill.
I deeply respect the president and the reasons that he has given for vetoing the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act. But I urge my colleagues to move swiftly and soundly to reverse this veto so that these families can have their day in court.
The president and opponents of the JASTA bill believe that this sets a very bad precedent, that it would hurt sovereignty and immunity, which is a bedrock of diplomacy, and that there could be retaliatory measures against U.S. citizens from foreign governments who find themselves in this predicament of being sued by U.S. citizens, and perhaps U.S. soldiers abroad could be vulnerable as well. Vote set for 12 noon today, probably the first override of a presidential veto in the Obama administration. John, back to you.
High drama there in the Capitol building where you are. Doug McKelway, thank you. So we are keeping an eye on Donald Trump. He is about to step to the microphone where Rudy Giuliani is speaking now in Chicago. We'll take you there as soon as Mr. Trump begins his remarks. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump speaking at the Polish-American Congress gathering in Chicago. Let's listen.
Been friends of mine for many years. I've had so many friends. They've been so loyal to me from Poland. Some living in Poland now, but mostly from Poland. And the Polish people are great people. These are great people. And if I get elected, believe me, we take care of all of our people. All of our people. But we do have a very, very special place because Polish Americans, what you've done for this country is really incredible. And I don't think, frankly, that people know the great sacrifices that you've gone through, and Frank and the whole group have done an incredible job. Even just coming to this building and seeing how well organized everything is, how beautiful it is, how clean, how you open it up to the community, Frank, it's amazing. So I just want to congratulate you, and I want to thank you. Thank you. I just met many of your leaders and representatives and your press. And I thought I'd say a few words. I wrote down a few words about Poland and my thoughts on Poland, and also on what's happening with respect to the Polish Americans. And I think it'll take a second, and I'll read it off a little bit to you because it's very important. To me, it's very important. It's an unbelievably important community. So I'm honored to be here with the Polish American Congress, and I pledge to you, a Trump administration will be a true friend to Poland and to all Polish Americans. And I have to tell you, and I don't think you people will be insulted to say, and if I say, we're going to be a friend to everybody. We're going to be friendly to everybody. You know, you heard about the deplorables, right? This is going to be one of those. We're going to be a friend to everybody. And if they don't like me, they will end up liking me, all right? I'll be a friend even when they don't like me, but they will end up liking me when we produce, because we have politicians that don't produce. It's very simple. And Poland has been such an incredible friend to America. And since our founding, if you look, it's been one of our great, great relationships and so important. Strong ally for freedom. During the Cold War, Poland kept the flame of freedom under communist oppression, and it was a beacon. And Poland provided 28,000 troops in total over the years to assist the United States in Afghanistan. That's a lot of troops, 28,000 troops for Afghanistan and Iraq in the hardest fought regions. And plenty of suffering, plenty of suffering. One of the things I wanted to do is mention
we are going to continue to monitor Donald Trump and his remarks there at the Polish-American Congress in Chicago. If he makes news during this speech, we will certainly bring you the highlights ahead on Happening Now. Fox News alert. Donald Trump is continuing at the podium in Chicago at the Polish-American Congress. He just brought up the name of Rudy Giuliani, who's written an editorial in support of Trump's position that the stop and frisk law, as it's known in New York, was a valuable tool in reducing the number of homicides here. And homicides nationwide obviously are a huge problem. Some new information on gun violence just in Chicago. In just the last 12 hours, from yesterday through this morning, 6 people were shot and wounded. That city has more than 3,200 shooting victims this year. as that controversial tactic known as stop and frisk is back in the national conversation. It allows officers to stop people and search them without actually arresting them, unless, of course, police find illegal weaponry or drugs. The practice and the issue of growing inner-city violence came up during Monday night's presidential debate.
Stop and frisk was ruled unconstitutional in New York because it largely singled out black and Hispanic young men.
No, you're wrong. It went before a judge who was a very against police judge. It was taken away from her, and our new mayor refused to go forward with the case. They would have won an appeal. If you look at it throughout the country, there are many places where
the argument is that it's a form of racial profiling.
No, the argument is that we have to take the guns away from these people that have them and that are bad people that shouldn't have them.
So let's get the legal perspective on stop and frisk, or a Terry stop as it's known in many jurisdictions. Lise Wheel is our Fox News legal analyst. Bob Bianchi is a criminal defense attorney, former head county prosecutor and trial attorney as well. You bring some personal experience to this, Bob, because you used to be an EMT in the inner cities, some of the worst neighborhoods of Newark, New Jersey, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, I worked professionally as an EMT. The amount of violence, and what I try to say with people is that you have to use the rule of reason with these things. Out on the street where you see these gang violence happening, it's a lot different feel that you have, even as an attorney, when people are shot and killed and mothers are wailing and there's blood all over you, and these young men who are being slaughtered in the prime of their lives because of the crime problems that are plaguing the city. And as a prosecutor, one of my jobs was to balance these interests and having proper interdiction in order to eradicate the crime so that people could live in a safe community, which most of these people want to do, and having aggressive yet constitutional law enforcement practices. And I think that we were able to achieve that with strong intelligence-led policing, sometimes stop and frisk, using a dashboard of crime where we need to go in aggressively, but also working with the community groups. So they always understood the context of what we were doing, and then escalation and de-escalation when that crime problem was abated. So stop and frisk has a valuable law enforcement component to it, but what this judge said was that unfortunately 90% of the people being stopped under the policy in New York did not have any contraband or have any weapons, and that we needed to reverse those policies to make stop and frisk more tailored towards the people, articulable suspicions, they would say, under the law, and I agree with that.
So what does the law say about when is this allowed?
Can we clear up the constitutionality issue?
Right. Lester Holt we just played that clip of Lester Holt saying it's unconstitutional in New York.
No. Let's just clear that whole issue up if we could right now. The Terry stop, the stop and frisk issue, decided back in 1968 in an 8-1 decision by the Supreme Court,
overwhelming,
is constitutional, okay? That is still constitutional. It is still the law of the land as a policy. It is constitutional. It is the way that it is applied that can be unconstitutional. If it has a disparate impact, basically a disparate impact against racial minorities, if there is a racial profiling which is going on, which is what was found to be happening here in New York by this judge, then the way it is applied can be held to be unconstitutional, right? But not the law itself. The Terry law, the stop and frisk law, has not been found to be unconstitutional as a law. That's the difference.
Yeah, and I think that what happened here is you have to understand when Terry came out, it was saying that stop and frisk is an appropriate legal practice. This has been in law for 50 years. What happened was that some police departments like NYPD had organized stop and frisk, not on individual bases like what was going on with Terry.
Right.
And what this judge said, and I read this decision, and the judge was not anti-police. She just basically said that indirectly it is having a far disparate impact on 90% of the law-abiding citizens in these communities. And I'm not saying that's this is something I got really confused in these debates.
Right.
She did not say stop and frisk is unconstitutional.
As the
manner in which it's being applied.
Exactly.
And here's what we can do to try to clear it up. She put a monitor in place. Let's have a pilot program. body cams.
So people be watching, exactly.
So that we know that there's not abuses of this, because we can't allow it to be a wholesale way to just search people.
Reasonable suspicion is a big part of his law.
It can't just be, I think something, you've got to have an articulable suspicion that something is going on, that there's an illegal activity that's going on right then and there. It just can't be, I just don't like the way that guy looks. It's got to be something more than just a hunch. I mean, you know, and there have been many, many law cases that have been litigated about what that is, that articulable suspicion that a police officer has.
Well, New York City Mayor, former Mayor Rudy Giuliani, given wide credit for bringing down the crime rate in this city along with his police commissioners. He's written an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal today about the legality and the intricacies of stop and frisk, so I would urge viewers to see that. Lisa Wheel, Bob Bianchi, thank you. Jenna.
Thank you. John, world leaders are remembering an Israeli political legend as they pay tribute to former President and Prime Minister Shimon Peres, who died yesterday at 93 after suffering a stroke. A look back at the life and legacy of the Nobel Peace Prize winner with our very own Eric Shawn, who sat down with Mr. Peres for one of his last interviews. Plus, Hillary Clinton's team is teaming up with Bernie Sanders to appeal to young voters today. But with so much bad blood, is it a lost cause? A fair and balanced debate. Next. Let's talk a little political strategy now. Hillary Clinton reaching out to young voters who have been in the past reluctant to support her. Clinton's secret weapon appears to be Bernie Sanders, who's hugely popular with millennials. The two will be campaigning together at the University of New Hampshire today, holding a rally and a discussion about college affordability. At a rally yesterday in North Carolina, Mrs. Clinton stressed the importance of these young voters.
We're seeing spikes in early voting. And we're seeing voting rates among African Americans, Latinos, and young people going up. And for the first time, the estimate is that young people could represent 25% of the vote. Obviously, I hope people vote for me, but I would love to see that, because every election is about the future.
Simon Rosenberg is president and founder of the New Democrat Network and a former campaign advisor for President Bill Clinton. Scott Jennings is a former special assistant to President George W. Bush and former Ohio State director for the Romney presidential campaign. It's great to have you both. Simon, what do you think about this? There was some, a little bad blood, a little aggression between two camps, the Sanders camp and the Clinton camp. By simply appearing with Bernie Sanders, will she inherit his support?
Well, I think we're going to find out, and this is really important for Democrats. We're much more dependent on younger voters than the Republican Party is, and since 2012, 20 million new millennial voters have come into the electorate. It's a 40% increase, up from 50 million to 70 million. So getting it right with young people for Hillary Clinton in the next few months could make the difference between her winning and losing the election. They're putting a lot of energy into it now. I think you're going to see a lot of Bernie Sanders. They understand what they have to do.
Scott, what do you think?
Well, I think Hillary Clinton's trying to solve a serious problem. She's far underperforming Barack Obama's approval rating with millennial voters. She's far underperforming in the polling what he got among millennials in 2012. And you can see from the geography where they're sending Bernie Sanders, New Hampshire, Minnesota. These are states that really ought to be pretty solidly blue right now, and that's where Bernie Sanders is going to campaign. So we've got really major political problems for Hillary among this group. She's got to recover. As Simon said, if they don't recover among this group, the composition of the electorate changes. They're leaking votes to Gary Johnson. It makes it real hard to win in some swing states, and it puts other blue states a lot closer than they'd like it.
Do you think it's make or break, Simon?
It's not make or break, but I think it's important, right? There's so many things that go into a winning campaign, and clearly Hillary had real problems with millennials in the primaries, and there's just much more of them than there used to be, right? I mean, there's going to be, in 2020, there'll be more millennials than any other group in the electorate, and so she's working really hard. The campaign understands they have a problem. They're producing media now. They've changed their schedule. She's speaking to young voters. She's campaigning with Bernie. They are working this very hard, and I think that they have the ability to really move the needle on this in the coming weeks.
Scott, there are some real differences, though, between Bernie Sanders and his platform and Hillary Clinton, and what attracted those younger voters. What do you think about that, and does that actually present potentially an opportunity for Donald Trump?
I think it does present an opportunity for Trump. It also may present an opportunity for Gary Johnson. Johnson is already winning some of these millennial voters because they don't like either a major party nominee. And I think the Trump campaign would be right to exploit the differences in policy, particularly on foreign policy, maybe the war in Iraq, as Trump continues to hit on that Sanders and Clinton have. What Hillary Clinton has to do is she's got to get these levels back up to where Obama had it in 2012 and where his approval rating is today. It is make or break, because if younger voters fall off, they become a smaller portion of the electorate. If they vote for third-party candidates, I mean, some of these swing states are going to be decided by 1 or 2 points. Leaking any part of the Obama coalition makes it very hard for Hillary Clinton to win. This is a key part of it.
Just a quick final question to you, Simon. I'm just curious about enthusiasm, because we're quick to forget, right, of the huge crowds that Bernie Sanders, the stadiums that he filled, like Donald Trump. And granted, Hillary Clinton had a nice crowd yesterday and what we saw live here on Happening Now, but it's different. It's different than what we saw with Bernie Sanders. So what about that enthusiasm? I know you'll say, well, you know, just those rallies don't necessarily translate into votes, but it is a different picture.
No, I think rallies matter, by the way, and I think they matter for Trump too. So I think that they are an indicator of enthusiasm. I think what you saw in the debate, for example, on Monday night, we saw a big increase in younger people watching the debate. Younger people are checking into this debate. They weren't as checked into the Democratic primary. You didn't see a lot of young people watching our debates on Saturday nights at 9 o'clock. But, you know, we're seeing young people checked into this election, and I think the Clinton campaign is doing what they have to do to get these numbers back to where they need to go.
And there's a question about whether or not it'll be successful, and we'll see. That's something we're going to be watching. Scott, Simon, great to have you both. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shimon Peres passed away last night at the age of 93. But just 2 months ago, Fox News senior correspondent Eric Shawn sat down with him at the former Israeli Prime Minister's apartment in Tel Aviv. What he told Eric about terrorism, the Jewish state, and life. Up next in a special remembrance.
Well, right now, leaders from around the world are paying tribute to an Israeli political legend after former President and Prime Minister Shimon Peres died last night at the age of 93. Peres being remembered as a man of peace, and his funeral is now set for Friday with President Obama and former President Bill Clinton among the VIPs expected to attend. Our senior correspondent Eric Shawn conducted one of Mr. Peres' final interviews just this past summer, and he joins us now with more. Eric?
Hello, Jenna. We know it was just 2 months ago when I interviewed Shimon Peres, sitting down in his apartment in Tel Aviv. He was warm, insightful, wise, optimistic. We talked about his role in Israel's founding, and at age 93, he shared what he has learned about life. His advice to young people: dream, imagine, don't be afraid to take risks, he said, much like he did. Peres was also confident that we will defeat terrorism. He expressed complete faith in the human spirit, saying it was the strength of that spirit that created and guided Israel, telling me that back in 1948, the nation had, as he put it, nothing. No money, no friends, no natural resources, just, he noted, human capability. And he said that same spirit will see us through today in the struggle against terrorism. You are a founding father of this nation. You have been through such threats and terrorism. What do you see as the future? What concerns you?
The future is, don't underrate the danger of the terrorists, but to take them as holy heroes. They are not. They have weaknesses. They are quite confused. And don't exaggerate with fear. You have to fear, but don't make fear the leading consideration, because they have weakness and our boys have a strength of their own.
You know, he had a joyful experience and exuberance about life. Look at this. After our interview, he brought out a chilled bottle of white wine from the Golan Heights, and along with my producer, Jonathan Wachtel, we simply toasted life. He was a gracious, remarkable man who has left a lasting legacy, and you know, it was such a privilege to spend that time with him just so recently. And as we left his apartment, Jenna, I'll always remember when he bid goodbye, he was smiling. And we'll have a lot more on this on FoxNews.com, by the way.
We'll look forward to that. Eric, thank you.
Thank you.
What a life. Tough talk from Secretary of State John Kerry, what he says he plans to do if he does not get cooperation from Moscow on the crisis in Syria. That's next. Nine minutes away from the top of the hour. Let's check out what's on Outnumbered. Sandra and Harris, what do you have?
Hey, John. Hey, great to see you. Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton back on the campaign trail and back to taunting each other, apparently. Is it a preview of the rest of the campaign from this point out? And what can we expect at the next debate coming around the corner?
Yes, it is. Plus, the First Lady on the trail and starring in a new campaign ad for Hillary as the president attends a ritzy Clinton fundraiser. Is the Democratic nominee leaning a bit too much on the first couple?
And the FBI director is being grilled for a second day right now on Capitol Hill over the immunity that was given to Clinton's aides in the email server investigation. How much is it going to affect her campaign?
All that plus our hashtag one lucky guy outnumbered. Join us top of the hour.
A first timer.
Oh, we'll see you then.
Yeah.
Take it easy on him.
Thanks, John.
Fox News Alert, Secretary of State John Kerry threatening to cut off all contact with Moscow over Syria unless Russian and Syrian government attacks on Aleppo end. Big news today. Lucas Tomlinson has the latest from the Pentagon. Lucas?
Well, that's right, Jenna. This morning, Secretary of State John Kerry spoke to his Russian counterpart and threatened to cut off all talks with Russia over Syria. Of course, things have escalated dramatically in the past week after a UN convoy delivering aid, food, blankets, toys for children was bombed. Officials say here at the Pentagon it was the Russians that were responsible for that bombing. There were Syrian jets also in the air. The Russians deny the accusation. They say a U.S. drone was in the air. Pentagon officials I have spoken to deny that charge. It's been a big back and forth, but one thing is not in dispute, Jenna. The Syrian people are the victims. Right now, there are about 250,000 Syrians trapped in eastern Aleppo, some cut off from food and water and are dramatically, they really need aid, they say. Secretary of State, when he spoke to his Russian counterpart, said, quote, the Secretary made clear the United States and its partners hold Russia responsible for this situation, including the use of incendiary and bunker buster bombs in an urban environment, a dramatic escalation that puts civilians at great risk. So you can see, Jenna, that the war of words continues, although to date the U.S. military is not conducting any kind of air operations over the skies of Aleppo to protect civilians on the ground, protect rebels, some whom are backed by the United States, and there's been no request by the international community to have U.S. jets protect these aid convoys as they come from Turkey into Aleppo. Also in the region, shifting gears over to Iraq, we're about to hear from Secretary of Defense Ash Carter. After a week of reports of an increase in U.S. troops on the ground there in Iraq, the Secretary, I'm told, will make an announcement that over 500 troops, maybe even as high as 600 troops are going to Iraq. We'll hear more, and we'll get back with you real soon, Jenna.
And that would bring the number, the total, to more than 6,000 there in Iraq. So it's something that we're watching very closely. Lucas, thank you. A lot of breaking news there.
A Fox Business alert on a story we have closely followed on happening now after one of America's biggest banks scammed millions of its own customers. Wells Fargo is not going to win any customer service awards. We're learning now that its CEO, John Stumpf, will forfeit a whopping $41 million over the scandal. This ahead of his planned testimony before the House Financial Services Committee tomorrow. Fox Business Network's Lauren Simonetti joins us live with the latest. Lauren.
All right. Hi, John. The financial consequences now of the Wells Fargo scandal over illegally creating those fake accounts has reached the executive suite. The bank taking the unusual move of clawing back tens of millions of dollars from key leaders, including, like you mentioned, $41 million from its CEO, John Stumpf, and $19 million from the retired Carrie Tolstead. She oversaw the division where the bank's bad behavior occurred. This is a big deal because since the financial crisis, regulators have been urging companies to claw back compensation for bad behavior, but boards of directors have been very hesitant to do so. All of this, of course, comes ahead of testimony tomorrow on Capitol Hill by some of the bank's executives, adding more pressure on Wells Fargo and its chief. On top of all of this, the Justice Department is investigating the bank. The Labor Department is looking into potential worker abuses to see if tellers, branch managers, and customer service representatives were threatened with losing their jobs if they didn't meet aggressive